resource is of significance both to the landowner who invests in solar collectors and to a society which has an interest in developing alternative sources of energy. So looking back at my notes and looking back through some of the minutes and things, my understanding is the last time this came up was that one of the concerns was, well, you know, this is kind of a developing area, kind of a developing field, and it's kind of a newer technology, and is there some concern that as this changes and the technology develops, that someone could place solar panels in a certain area strategically to try to prevent construction or development in an area, and they wanted to at least retain the ability to say, well, put it on the front of the property as opposed to the back of the property, or put it on the east side of the garage instead of the west side, or whatever it might be, just to retain some of that. However, I do want to point out that the Supreme Court didn't say that the right is absolute. The Supreme Court said this. They said that the obstruction of access to light might be found to constitute a nuisance in certain circumstances, but this does not mean that it will or must be found to constitute a nuisance under all circumstances. The result in each case depends on whether the conduct complained of is unreasonable. So again, I think it's important to remember that the Pratt versus Moretti case decided by the Supreme Court in 1982, it doesn't hold that a property owner with solar panels has an absolute unfettered access to sunlight all the time. And it doesn't mean that if a conflict arose, that the court would always necessarily decide in favor of the existing solar panel owner. But given the reasonable standard that they set up and the concept behind the decision, which is we favor access to solar, not for aesthetic reasons or because of illumination reasons, those aren't an issue, it's for energy, that you know, you could have a situation where you could have a conflict in that in the future. Now, I do note that the proposed amendments still gives the staff ability to say, you know, if they're aware of some kind of issue, put it on the garage instead of the home, put it on the east side instead of the west side, whatever the case might be. So that review is retained, and I don't see any obstacle to the municipality saying, even though it's permitted use, we're still going to regulate it in some ways, just as if you'd have to go with you're going to put a new addition on your house or build a garage where one doesn't exist. There's hoops that you'd have to jump through with respect to the municipality, and I don't think that this would be any different. So again, no legal impediment to doing this, given the number of applications that are coming through, might make perfect sense. But again, I would be amiss if I didn't tell you what the Pratt versus Moretti case said and what the Supreme Court did back in 1982, and just keep that in mind as we move forward and potentially hand that over to staff.
Thank you. I have some questions, but do the commissioners, anybody have a question? Commissioner Klein?
Yeah, I have a question. So you're striking the word solar energy and all on the form, and I always think of solar panels as different than a solar water heater. Right, source of energy, a thermal source of energy. Are you intentionally doing that, or?
Does the word, are you asking also, is the word solar energy strictly in the zoning code as it stands today referring to solar panels, or is it?
So the thing I was pointing out, I guess the question I'll ask it, I'll make it a question. We're striking the word solar energy from needing to come to the board, whether it's thermal or electrical. So whether people are putting up solar panels or large tubes to heat water, to heat their water, you know, instead of their electricity. Either one of those is no problem.
So the definition of solar energy system will remain, and that definition is equipment which directly converts and then transfers or stores solar energy into usable forms of thermal or electrical energy. So I think that's kind of an all-encompassing definition. So yeah, whether it's tubes or photovoltaic systems or cells, that's my understanding of the definition.
Walking around this village, I only know of one solar water heater that I could think of. You know, other applicants are good for panels, right?
Sure.
Do you see any issue with the solar tubes or thermal?
Well, they sure look different, you know, when
I haven't seen them.
I just want to make sure all the commissioners were aware of the difference.
I'm not,
I'm
so.
not, Education.
Well, the
You can blame us.
solar hot water systems are actually more efficient than solar, and I'm surprised that they're not used more. We install them in a number of cases where there's a lot of usage, I think. That's probably why you don't see them on homes as much.
Commercial?
Actually, the last time I put them on a Humane Society building, because they watch dogs a lot and things like that. And they didn't do any energy production. It was all solar hot water.
So-
And the payback is probably 7 years versus, 10 years for energy.
So Salons might take up on that?
Right, and I will point out, I'm happy to look at further definitions and confirming all these things. The American Planning Association has a 150-some page document here on how other communities do it. There's a whole section on best practice definitions. I was just using the one that we had adopted in 2015, so I was unaware if there had been any discussion on that, but I'd be happy to further parse that out within here to see if there's a better modified version of that I could present options with next time if the commission would like, or if they're happy with this one, we can quote that as well, but.
So the one we have today sounds like it by striking that word, we're allowing by right in all zoning districts, both solar panels and, okay, so unless a commissioner has concern with that, we'll keep it as is.
That would be my thought. I believe the definition right now encompasses both energy and thermal production.
And trustee, Commissioner Linton.
Oh, so what does the solar water heater look like? Or does it look very different from a solar panel?
Do you install those types of systems?
We don't, it's more of a cylinder tube-like than square rectangles. I mean, I'd say more elevated, panel lays flat, it's more raised. It does look quite different.
I think it's kind of cool.
There's one on Jimmy Kaufman's house.
Talk about that. So I personally don't have a problem with the current.
They typically don't lie flat like the other ones do. They have to be tilted up at a better angle towards the sun in order to get, they have to face south, especially here.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what, staff would need the ability to do is, do we want them facing the street? Do we want them on struts, or do they always have to follow the slope of the roof? Those kinds of things, which I think we looked at in the past.
Yeah, there's different definitions for freestanding systems versus, roof-mounted systems or building-mounted systems. We kind of had a catch-all definition that we were working with, and so I guess the question I would need to research the state statute to see whether or not we can limit any of those other things, because right now, aesthetics is not a reason to deny something, currently. So if that's the sole reason why you would want to separate them out, I would just caution us to know that that's also not a reason why you can deny it, or you can modify or restrict certain things, but aesthetics is not a reason to do that. Currently, it's my understanding I would need to confirm state statute language.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the ordinance models or is verbatim on the statute.
Right.
You can review the plan and restrict the system or ask them to modify the system if the request serves to preserve or protect public health or safety, or does not significantly increase the cost of the system or significantly decrease its efficiency, or allows for an alternative system with comparable cost and efficiency. So because it's or, not and, number two is the one where you end up with, if you think you're going to have, if you've got somebody butting up against a development district where you've got planned development going and you're lucky to put it on the other side of the garage rather than, if it doesn't increase the cost of the system and it makes no difference thermally in terms of efficiency, you just tell them to do that.
Correct.
So that was my question that I jotted down. Currently, or with the change, are we simply passing our review abilities to staff? So there's no change except they're gonna do what we currently do now. And I say that because staff or us, either way, would be able to ask them to move the placement as long as those conditions, so if we eliminate it as a conditional use, does staff still have the same ability to ask someone to move the location if it satisfies those three criteria, or those criteria you just read off?
My
If it's a
reading-
permitted use.
my reading of the proposed change, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the answer to that question is yes.
Yes,
Even as a permitted use?
correct. Yep, the draft does indicate that the planning director or his designee would review with those three stipulations in mind and could restrict or modify based on that. So it would move that review over to staff who could ideally do it in a quicker fashion and not have to do it.
And then if they want to appeal for any reason, it goes to Board of Appeals? Is that correct? It would come here, right?
Correct. Yep, administrative appeals go to Board of Appeals, so it would not go to the planning commission, it goes directly to the Board of Appeals to determine whether or not staff interpreted something incorrectly.
Commissioner Patel?
So I guess I have a question related to that case you read. It sounds like, if my neighbor decides to put up a solar panel or a solar wind power, I may lose the ability to grow a tree there. I mean, I guess
You
I'm
might.
like,
Well,
right, so I mean, the point of the public hearing is that somebody could come in, a neighbor, and object to it. Or if there's no public hearing process, then is my understanding what the difference would be is the neighbors no longer would have the ability to say something about it. It would just go straight administratively. Whereas if it stayed with the planning commission, the neighbors, I mean, I guess it's a little disturbing that, I guess I would want, did the Supreme Court say that the other homeowner, and on the facts, what did they decide? That homeowner couldn't build the house or the
Well,
way they wanted it?
they sent it back to the circuit court for
Yeah, I
further findings,
figured.
yeah.
So they had to
But
find out
they
if
did-
it was constituting a nuisance?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, they sent it back for factual determination based upon a set of criteria. But again, keep in mind, I think it's important to point out that they were also careful to say that
That's to be
that it's factual, it's fact specific, and it's not gonna be the same,
right, and it has to be a
necessarily the same
specific
decision
nuisance.
every time. Exactly, and the other thing to consider is, makeup of the court today is a little different than it was. And that's literally, that's something to
Sure.
consider. But, so, I'm not sure how favorable they'd be to the homeowner versus the, perspective to the
Commissioner Whitman?
I expand on President Rozak's question a little. So if, there's a difference between a conditional use and a permitted use.
Right.
So if it's a permitted use, all of a sudden, and let's play out that crazy example where somebody wants to put up panels in block development. So they're on Oakland, and they're on the west side of the street, and there's a parking lot building up against Oakland. They say, well, I'm gonna put panels on the west side of my garage, and now I've prevented anyone from building a building there, supposedly.
And to expand on that, let's say it's a non-conforming structure that was built before the code and it happens to be 6 inches from the lot line.
Sure.
So it's a more acute, okay.
Right, and so staff would say, well, you're putting them on the east side of your garage. That doesn't make much sense, because you could put them on the south side and get better sun. And they say, no, I want them on the east side of my garage, that's where I've always wanted solar panels. We tell them no, but it's a permitted use, and granted they can go appeal it. Isn't it a stronger, don't we have to then as Shorewood prove that, it puts the burden of proof on us as opposed to them, right? When they come for conditional use, they have to show us that they,
Right, well, and that's a good question.
I'm making sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that, well, let me answer it this way. The threshold question is, if we amend it to a permitted use, can we still then say, put it over here rather than over there? I think that the answer to that question is yes, because in other contexts, where we make someone pull a permit to do a certain type of work, there are still other restrictions that we can place on that, even regardless of whether it's a permitted use or a conditional use or any other kind of a use.
Give me an example.
You come and pull a permit to build a garage, and we're gonna tell you that, because of the way that the physical lot is structured, or if it's it's an existing non-conforming use, that may impact as to which direction you can face the garage, or a number of other issues that might impact the size of the physical footprint of the garage, and whether or not you could have a pad next to it. So there's all kinds of regulations that might apply, even if something is otherwise permitted.
Even if it's not written in the code? Because usually all of those things are written in the code. So you have like land coverage ratios, you have green ratio. I'm just saying,
Yeah, you're right.
I think they all kind of in the code, that's why I say example. Can you think of an example of where it's not written in the code, but you can say, I want you to do this as a permitted use?
There are existing,
And I guess that's why my draft had those three stipulations within the code, so they would still be in the code.
So as a permitted use?
Yeah, it's drafted as a permitted use subject to those three review standards, so it would be clear.
Can you do that?
Well, it's the same thing as a setback, like you can build a house subject to having a setback.
Okay,
You can have a solar energy system as long as it meets these three requirements. At least that's my understanding of how the zoning code is drafted, but if there's a different legal opinion, but that's essentially, we allow things permitted subject to, yeah, setback, height restrictions, lot coverage ratio, you know, design review control, things like that. We do have.
yep. Great.
with that, again, that was, my first question was, if we amend it to a permitted use, can we have staff monitor A, B, and C under the code? And again, I think the answer to that is yes, because of what's already in the existing state statutes. But I think that if